I think we're on air, so we'll get the meeting started here. This is the October 26, 2021 Board of Adjustments meeting. So we'll call it to order, and our first order of business is approval of minutes from the July 27th, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right. Carries, and we'll move to item 2, which is new business, and we have a variance request for 1425 Main Avenue, and we'll let Megan take over.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Adjustment members. We do have 4 members right now. As you know, for approval of a variance, the supermajority is required, and so that would mean 4 out of the 5 members. The 5th member, I believe we are contacting right now to see if they are available or are on their way. If you maybe give us just a little bit of time.
So the applicant, you have the option to, so if we have 4 members, so it would take all 4 yeses to approve a variance. Your options are we can either wait a little bit, see if our 5th member shows up, or if you'd like to continue it to another meeting, we have that option as well.
We would move forward today.
Move forward? Okay.
All right, item 2A is a request for 2 variances on the same property. A variance of section 20.0502 of the Land Development Code for the rear setback, and variance of the city's floodproofing code for the lowest opening or finished floor. The property is located at 1425 Main Avenue, and the owner is proposing to construct a new commercial building at this location. Planning staff will do a brief presentation on the variance for the rear setback and then turn it over to the engineering staff to present on the variance on the floodproofing code, as planning staff defers to the engineering department for their technical analysis and recommendation. So staff received the variance application to encroach into the required rear yard setback. Section 20.0502 of the Land Development Code requires a 15-foot rear yard setback in the GC General Commercial Zoning District. The applicant proposes to construct a commercial building that would encroach 5 feet into the rear yard setback, which would place the structure 10 feet from the rear property line. Attached to the packet is the proposed site plan, and it's also up on your screen. The property was first platted in January of 2021, and with the plat, 5 feet of right-of-way was dedicated for future reconstruction of Main Avenue. Per notification requirements of section 20.0901-F of the Land Development Code, notice was published in the newspaper, and property owners within 300 feet were notified of the application. Staff has not received any inquiries on this application. Planning staff does not have a recommendation for the rear yard setback variance. The applicant, Elissa Novotny, is here, and I believe she'd like to address the board, but first I'll hand it over to Jody Bertrand, Division Engineer for the floodproofing variance.
Morning, board members. Like she said, Jody Bertrand from the Storm Sewer Utility. Usually during our site plan reviews, we actually go ahead and take the elevations and compare them to what our requirements are based on either FEMA requirements or our own individual higher standards that presently the city of Fargo maintains for the finished floor. Upon review of these elevations, the existing site plan has identified that all the requirements for the FEMA requirements, whether it's at the building, finished floor, or 15 feet out from the structure, are met. The only variance request is to allow them to build 1.3 feet lower than what our 41-foot elevation is. I guess at this time, upon review, and I guess as she mentioned, the applicant has given us through the platting process an additional 5 feet to help us reconstruct Main Avenue. As part of that, we know that hopefully within the next 2 years, we're going to be reconstructing Main Avenue. What the elevation would allow us to do, if you guys would approve it, is to have greater flexibility with the design of the street section. If we have that higher elevation of the 41-foot, it would drastically tie our hands, and we're trying to go ahead and institute either the high points and low points of the future street section. So I guess at this time, the engineering department is in favor or would approve of giving the variance for the 41-foot city-imposed higher standard than what FEMA has us required to enforce. Any questions?
Previously, when we were allowing these variances to go through, there was some question of whether or not there's a point at which this trips FEMA for no longer funding or providing extra funding to our area if we go over a certain number of these variances.
I think what it is they like to see that we're doing good management practices. We're not just giving them everywhere. And as I kind of mentioned, the FEMA standards, or whether it's the state standards, we're exceeding those. FEMA has a base flood elevation, and what we're doing is presently we go 2 feet higher than that. So that's fairly significant, since I think the state is only the BFE +1. So I think we're still covered in FEMA's eyes that we're still managing the floodplain efficiently.
And Jody, your recommendation for approval is contingent on them signing that waiver of liability, correct?
Correct, yeah. If would happen that FEMA would come back, or they would happen to change the floodplain and then saying we were on the hook for allowing it to build at a lower standard.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Just maybe a statement or question might be more directed towards the owner himself, but was the construction proposed to be floodable? Their actual detailing of the building to that flood stage?
Actually, it's just a slab on grade, so the actual elevations at their finished floor is above that, 2 foot above the FEMA 100 year. So if we have issues with foundations or crawl spaces or something like that, then we'd that's when kind of the floodproofing code would come in more into effect than just the straight elevation requirement. If that answers your question.
So Jody, maybe just for clarification and to help with the discussion. So the reason behind the original reason behind the 41-foot water surface elevation inundation area was so that in case FEMA remapped that properties that were built between now and when it was remapped would hopefully not be in the new floodplain, correct?
Correct. It was information achieved through the hydraulic analysis of the diversion product. They found that the way FEMA interpreted the elevations from their data from the 60s and 70s, they didn't update a lot of that. So they went ahead and, through the efforts of the diversion process, they found that our truth that is probably closer to the 41-foot elevation would be the new imposed 100 year. But with the diversion kicking off too, we're kind of in the gray area until we get that certified.
Has the FEMA map been updated to that?
No, it was just information that's now available that FEMA, if they had funding available, there would have been a possibility that they could come in and remap us at that higher elevation.
But it's projected to at some point, we just don't know when.
Well, it's all going to change when the diversion is done. It's actually going to drop a couple feet from where it is at 39.3. So once the diversion is actually in place and certified, then it'll actually probably, I don't have the specific number if it goes down to 37 or what that number is for the new 100 year, but it'll be even lower than what we presently have. There's a lot of the areas that are shown in blue on our GIS map. Those will come back out like they were prior to the 2015 map change.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? No. All right. The applicant like to speak?
Hi there, thank you. Listen to Vatney here with Dovetail Development. What I just want to explain here is that we've had a really challenging project here. Along Main Avenue, shallow depth property, we're basically bookended from the railroad properties to the north, Main Avenue to the south. We've had challenges with trying to accommodate for the 2024 redevelopment of Main Avenue, and then also with the reuse of the site. We went through several iterations of trying to reuse the main central building. Totally in all the existing enclosed buildings that we had on site, we had 20,452 square feet. Our new building area proposed is 19,500 square feet. With those iterations, we had looked at reusing the existing building, adding on additions. Our first and I've been working with the owner, John, here since 2019. But when we first presented our first concept to city planning, that was back in June of 2020. And with that presentation, we were looking for city support for going for a variance at that time to continue an addition to the existing central building and continuing that addition onto the west. With that, though, there was a lot of constraints where we would have been non-compliant. With that, the existing building addition currently they had that was over into the railroad property. We also had only approximately 3.5 feet, so 3 foot 5 inches from the existing property line was that main building to the north. And then from the south side, there was a dual-sided loading dock area, which was basically, if we were using it as is, as if it was grandfathered in, we were crossing traffic for the loading, unloading of what we were wanting to do on this site. So with that, we looked at, like I said, several different options, went all the way through the concept of, do we go for a PUD? Do we go for variance? Is there any way that we can work within the existing zoning, the general commercial zoning, and try to make this work? Where we settled at that, I believe it was in October of last year then, we had determined that we were able to, with an addition that was attached to that existing building, we were able to get the amount of square footage that we needed for the reuse of the site, plus moving all of our parking over to the east portion of that site. But with that, we still had the issue of the reuse of that loading dock area where we're crossing over traffic. So our understanding is that for us to get a building permit, even for the rehabilitation of that existing building, we needed to go through a platting process. With that platting process, accommodating a 5 foot right of way, once we started getting into the continuing the design development of that concurrently with the platting process, it was determined that we're not going to be able to find a solution for the loading and unloading of trucks off of Main Avenue unless we were crossing over that traffic there. So we had proposed a solution that would be a complete new build on the site so that we could try to make this as compliant as possible. And with that, and also just one thing to consider too is with the reuse of that existing building, that existing finished floor elevation was 48 inches above the finished grade at Main Avenue. And so we could really only work in for accessibility and reuse of that site or that building was to have a one-way in parking lot that were basically retaining walls up on the side there, which would be right along Main Avenue. And so that also created some constraints for the possibility of how does the Main Avenue redevelopment become affected with that, because we have such a shallow lot. If you look at the diagram that I've put up on the screen here, what you can see is that we have the new right-of-way, so existing property lines is in the red. So this was an aerial taken in 2019 before the replat. And with that, I'm showing the new 5 foot right-of-way, 5 feet off of that south property line. And then what the building setbacks would be are in the dashed white that's in the perimeter. What we're proposing is, so that we're not continuing to crowd or encroach on that Main Avenue for the redevelopment, is basically replacing the 60-foot building, but with a new 60-foot deep building, but encroaching 5 feet into the building setback. Now, we've still made a gain because the previous setback of the building, if that were to remain in place, is 3 foot 5, whereas now we're pushing that back to leaving 10 feet there. We also have the restriction too that there's not the possibility of trying to acquire additional property from the railroad or anything like that. There's an existing retaining wall that's actually quite aggressive back there. It looks like a simple single line here on the drawing on the aerial, but really if you're on site, it's quite tall. So it just doesn't really give us the opportunity to get what we need done on this site without this variance to accommodate this. And then also, the other thing just to mention too is that when we went to the new site rebuild concept. Before we started the architectural engineering drawings on that, we put it in front of city planning, city engineering, but now we had two groups, and you have to understand too, we're going through the whole new communication. Everything's virtual, no in-person meetings during the COVID situation. And so there was miscommunication and or confusion about what we're actually proposing and what we actually designed with a complete new build versus the city staff that were involved during the process of the platting that were assuming that we were planning on reusing the existing building and making some concessions there with how we're planning on trying to accommodate that with drives into the site and truck movements and things like that. So submitting fully engineered and architectural stamped drawings in April of this last year for permit, went through the review process, approved from both city planning and engineering, inspections, was ready to write permits upon the receipt of pre-engineered metal building drawings. And as you may know, with where we're at with the supply issues and everything, the only way for us to get those drawings is you order a building, you put your down payment down. So we have a 60-foot deep building that's on its way. And when requesting for building permit, once we had gotten those drawings and everything, city inspections made us aware. They said the city engineering and city planning approvals have been pulled. And so we need to set up a meeting to try to figure out what more questions are there lying out there that we need to accommodate and or respond to for us to get the building permit. So this was approximately a month ago. We had a meeting with all departments again, and that's when we thought we were going into the meeting to talk about the number of entry points into the site, and also the city engineering wanted us to consider, bringing down the finished floor elevation just so that we can have a more, to accommodate that redevelopment of Main Avenue. If we bring that down, because then that just helps with us meeting accessibility concerns and everything like that from the site standpoint. And when we walked away from the meeting, what we realized was we actually had a 60-foot deep building, which is what we had been planning for all along, not realizing that we lost that extra 5 feet that we needed with that right of way in order to do that 60-foot building. So what we're looking at proposing today and hoping to get approval on is if we can take that 60-foot building, maintain the new setback from the new property line, so basically we would be 25 feet from Main Avenue from that property line. And, but that would require that we're encroaching into that north area. And we're really excited for this project. We've been working really hard. We have additional drawings, renderings, things like that, if helpful, to help convey what our intents are. But we really just want to have a successful project so that we can have this business, the Asian and American supermarket, who currently is on Main Avenue, leasing a space there, but they're wanting to own and continue to have a thriving business there. So really looking to continue that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant?
No.
No. Any further info the city would like to provide, or everybody good? No? All right. So just to remind everyone, there's two variances being requested, one for the flood elevation and one for the setback. So we can either take them as one motion joined together, or we can take them as two separate ones, however you would like to approach it. So just if you're looking at the staff recommendation, just know that that does not include anything about the 10-foot or the 5-foot setback variance.
Does staff have any input on the 5-foot setback? If there's any concerns?
I guess unless Mark Williams, Assistant Director for the Planning Department, has any comments, I think everything that staff wanted to kind of outline is in the staff report.
I think it's good to know that staff understands this is an extremely challenging site that hasn't been redeveloped. As far as the reconstruction Main Avenue hasn't been platted since the city was incorporated ever. It's adjacent to the railroad, and it appears this solution is the best possible option that staff can see for this site.
With that, I think it'd be best just to take it all at one then.
Okay. Does anyone have a motion they would like to propose?
I can make a motion. I make a motion to accept the findings of the staff and hereby approve the requested floodproof variance on the basis that the review considerations of section 210603 have been satisfied, with the condition that the applicant sign and submit a waiver of liability against the city, and that the proposed 5-foot encroachment on the rear setback for the property be approved.
I make a second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No. Please call the roll.
Or, excuse me, Orth,
Aye, in favor?
Yep.
Yes.
Breen,
Aye.
Wendell Dobb,
Aye.
Love.
Yes.
All right, your variance is approved, both variances. We have no other business, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.